Yeah, I was at this guy's house. It was a Sunday afternoon. I was 14 years old. We were there with two girls, and I couldn't afford the album because it was like in old money. It was 30 bob, which is £1.50 now, and I didn't have any money. So
right.
I actually borrowed the album off the guy after that, and he never got it back for about 6 months. So I could learn. I gave it back, and it was worn out.
Gary Moore, the legendary Irish guitarist, was a prominent feature on the English radio programme Planet Rock. Renowned for his incredible blues and rock prowess, Moore's contributions included exclusive interviews, live sessions, and curated playlists that showcased his deep knowledge and passion for music. His involvement added a rich, authentic touch to the station, delighting fans with his insightful commentary and electrifying performances, solidifying his legacy in rock history. Here you can listen to Gary guesting the show My Planet Rocks in 2007, playing a selection of his favourite blues tracks.
The music that shaped a life. This is My Planet Rock.
Out in the Fields from Gary Moore's 1985 album Run for Cover. And we're very pleased to welcome Gary to My Planet Rocks this week to tell us about his favourite tracks. Let's take one here from Eric Clapton. You've picked Hideaway. Tell us why you've gone for that.
Well, Hideaway was on the 1960s album Blues Breakers with Eric Clapton and John Mayall, and it was the album that turned me on to the blues, basically. And this is when Eric was playing at his most fiery. He was only like 21 when he made this record, and it's an incredible piece of guitar playing. It's a Freddie King instrumental, and Eric sort of done his own version, and he's kind of shown the world what he's made of. So it's a great track.
On Planet Rock, it's My Planet Rocks, talking to Gary Moore, who chose Eric Clapton, and the track Hideaway from a Blues Breakers album. I believe I'm right in saying on the same album there was a track which you covered on your Best of Blues album. That's the Otis Rush song.
Yeah, that's right. All Your Love. I was going to choose that for this program, but a lot of people now know that was the song that turned me on to the blues. All Your Love. It was track 1, side 1 on the Blues Breakers album, and that was the track that changed my life forever. Actually, so
can you actually remember it doing that? I mean, is that this thing?
Yeah, I was at this guy's house. It was a Sunday afternoon. I was 14 years old. We were there with two girls, and I couldn't afford the album because it was like in old money. It was 30 bob, which is £1.50 now, and I didn't have any money. So
right.
I actually borrowed the album off the guy after that, and he never got it back for about 6 months. So I could learn. I gave it back, and it was worn out. But when I first heard that track, it just came on. It was on this little mono record player, and the guitar just leapt out and grabbed me so much I couldn't believe it. I'd never had a guitar being played so passionately. And
you've been playing yourself for a few years by then, haven't you?
I've been playing for 4 years by then, but all the guitars that had kind of gone before that were very sort of polite and very small and kind of twangy, and all of a sudden here was a guy with a Les Paul and a Marshall for the first time ever. He created that sound on that album, so it was the first time anyone had ever heard the basis of what was to become what we now know as rock guitar.
We're going to play a Hendrix track now. Manic Depression you've chosen, big back catalogue. How did you come down to that one?
Well, it goes back to that era again. I mean, this kind of followed the Blues Breakers for me as the next big guitar record that came out. It came out maybe a year or two later, and I remember seeing Jimi Hendrix on a TV show, Ready Steady Go, and he came on and he mimed to Hey Joe, and I remember hearing the song start, and it was like, oh, this great sort of R&B singer, soul singer. That's how I kind of saw him. But then these guitar fills started creeping in, and I was going, wait a minute, what's going on here? This guy could be really special. There's something's going to happen. And the next thing, he put the guitar up to his face, and the solo, he was only miming it, but I realised what he was doing. I was thinking, this guy plays with his teeth. It's like, I haven't seen that around a lot. And,
wasn't a Hank Marvin trick, was it?
Oh,
really?
no, it wasn't really, no. He wasn't pushing his glasses up his nose or anything like that. And the next thing, the album came out. One of my friends from school again bought the album, and he was like ranting on about the album for days, and I went round to his place and we played it, and this is one of the tracks that blew me away.
Hendrix and Manic Depression on Planet Rock, where our guest on My Planet Rocks is Gary Moore, who chose that track, as we heard before, for the way that Hendrix was one of the people who changed the way that guitar was being played at the time. You've already said that when you were about 14 you heard the Blues Breakers album. You'd been playing the guitar. What did you actually do from that point to change the way that you played the guitar? Was it as simple as, I've heard this and now I've got to emulate it?
It kind of was like that to start. I mean, like I said, I borrowed the album from this friend of mine, and I took it home, and I'd come home from school every day and just sit there learning all Eric's solos as close as I could. I couldn't get the sound because I didn't have the right kind of equipment.
Yeah.
That was a big problem, and I couldn't afford that kind of equipment. So I learned the notes, and I learned to express the guitar in that way, and that was a big start for me. And it's the whole basis for my playing kind of comes from that record, I have to be really honest, and that whole era, because I still kind of play the same way as I played then, hopefully a bit better, but that's really, it was the same licks that I'm playing now. So without that record, I don't know where a lot of guitar players today would be, or especially of my generation anyway, because I think it turned the world upside down for a lot of guitarists at that time. And it's just a very special record. It's one of those milestones, the way like maybe people in the 80s or the late 70s were listening to people like Van Halen, because he came up with a kind of so-called new technique, for tapping and stuff, and that kind of changed the guitar for a lot of kids who were playing then, and that was kind of my Van Halen of its day, I suppose.
Yeah.
Get ready to dance, everybody, yeah.
Rock Commander is a celebration of rock and metal culture. Manage your own rock bands, connect with a passionate community, and experience exclusive collaborations with real bands like American Chaos and Adam and the Metal Hawks.
Well, interestingly, we're going to play a Beatles track here that you chose, and interestingly because you've also cited the Beatles as being, you're a big fan of them, but their guitar was entirely different. That was a whole different. What was it that drew you to the Beatles? I mean, you've chosen "Here Comes the Sun."
Well, I'd heard the Beatles before that, obviously, because they were around before the Blues Breakers stuff came out, early '60s, and I loved George Harrison so much because the way he would construct a little kind of solo within the song, which would be part of the song. So from him I learned about melody. Well, from him and Hank Marvin, actually, I learned about melody, a very simple way of playing. And again, it was a great basis to move on to something more kind of complex and more kind of aggressive later on. But George Harrison would create a little masterpiece in 8 bars in the middle of Hard Day's Night, for example, is a perfect example of that, where he would do something that no other guitarist in the world would think of. He would just put this little lick in it, would have some little maybe fast bits in it, and it would just be so kind of outside what you'd imagine the solo for that song to be. Later on, I got to know George very well. We became very good friends at one time, and he could do things that no one else could do, and his slide playing was amazing because he used to have very strong Eastern influences from the days with Ravi Shankar and and doing the meditation and everything, and he just to be around someone like that, you learn so much. He really was a giant in the music world for me. Very sadly missed. And I've chosen this song, "Here Comes the Sun." The first time I heard this song, I was about to go on an American tour when I was about 17 with the band Skid Row. I remember playing that song just before I went to the airport and thinking I'm going to California, and it just gave me this lovely sunny feeling, so I've chosen it.
You're listening to Planet Rock. Gary Moore is here this week, and coming up we've got "Here Comes the Sun" from the Beatles. We'll chat about B.B. King. There's some Fleetwood Mac, and of course some Thin Lizzy. On Planet Rock, it's my Planet Rocks. Our special guest today is Gary Moore, who has influenced so many guitarists, and we're listening to the songs that maybe influenced him. The Beatles' "Here Comes the Sun" was a track that you talked about, and specifically you heard it just before you went over to America. I think you started in Skid Row when you were about 16.
Yeah, I joined them. They were a Dublin band, and I was from Belfast. And
that's a fast transition, because you first heard the record that changed your life when you were 14. You're now a professional musician at 16. Wasn't that a really unsettling experience, or did you love it?
No, it was all I ever wanted. I mean, I loved it.
Did you ever consider anything apart from guitar playing?
When I was about 7, I wanted to be a journalist.
Right.
What happened was I was standing in for this other band called The Method. The guitarist, it was a guy that I knew, had a car crash, and they were doing a kind of residency every week in Dublin at a place called the Club A Go-Go. And they asked me if I'd come and stand in. So I was down there, I was playing every Wednesday night, and this guy from Skid Row, a guy called Bruce Shields, whose band it was, came and asked me about joining the band. And I said, I was a right little blues snob at the time. I still am, actually. And I said, well, do you play blues? He said, no, we play our own stuff and sort of West Coast American music like the Byrds and all that stuff, Buffalo Springfield. And I said, I'm not really interested. But then the bass player that I was working with said, no, you should go and see this band because they've got this really freaky big black guy singing at the front. And it was Phil Lynott, of course, it turned out. So in those days, he didn't play bass, he just used to sing. He was a stand-up singer as opposed to a stand-up comic. And he used to make all these amazing noises. He had this sort of echo unit. And he used to make all these explosions and stuff. He just twiddled the knobs while he was singing. And he was quite a presence on stage. And he kind of drew me into the band, actually. It was, if he hadn't been there, I don't think I would have bothered, to be honest. But thank goodness he was, because it kind of set me on a great path and got me away from home, and I got to be what I wanted to be, which was a professional musician. And eventually that band became a three-piece band, and we sort of started playing different kinds of music, so it kind of developed from there.
Through all of these songs, you've talked about the great technical strides that these guitarists made, if you like, the way that they played.
Emotional strides.
That's right, which brought out the emotion of the instrument.
Yeah.
How is the secret then, if for guitarists, young guitarists just listening now while they're listening to Gary Moore, is the secret just practice, just to sit and play and learn this stuff, or do you have to have special fingers? There's a friend of mine who works here. We talk about guitarists who have magic fingers. You just can't understand how they do that. Just practice?
Well, there are certain people that do have a natural gift, but even if you have a natural gift, you still have to work really hard, because in fact I think more so then, because if you've got that gift and you just throw it away, then you're a complete jerk anyway. You've got to really, really work at it. And the better you are, and the harder you work at it, the better you're going to become. But I think a really important thing, as early as possible, is to play with other people, regardless of what kind of music you play or what instrument you play. Actually, it doesn't matter. Just get in and play with other people. Don't sit in your bedroom playing on your own, because there's a billion bedroom guitarists in the world. They can play all the fast licks and they can sit there with all the scales, and it just doesn't really mean anything to anybody except them. So get out and play with people and get your groove going and get your rhythm happening with playing with a bass player and a drummer especially. You've got to get in there and get your timing together and your phrasing and play with the best people you can play with. It doesn't matter, look, at the start, just copy everybody. That's how I learned. Eventually, if you work hard enough and if you are any good, your own style is going to come through. But it's not going to happen overnight. All these guys that you hear, that you look up to, they've all worked for a long time at what they do. It didn't just fall into their lap. Much as I used to think it did. I used to think these guys could just pick up the guitar from day one and play like that. It doesn't happen like that. You've got to work really, really hard at it. And if you really care about it and you put your whole heart into it, then eventually it will come through.
You've chosen a track from B.B. King, who, as well as being an influence, you toured with, and you've done a lot of work with. How did it feel going out on the road with someone as fantastic as that? Well,
it was a real, like I said earlier, it was an honour to be asked to do the tour. I wasn't actually aware that it was his last tour.
Yes, his farewell, wasn't it?
His farewell UK tour, and then I thought, well, it might be, and then I saw the billing for it, and it said B.B. King's farewell UK tour, so that made it even more special, because you realise, well, he won't be coming back here again. It was quite funny on the tour, because some of the members of the band, like the horn players, the brass section, were coming up to me with their business cards, and do you ever use horns, Gary? I said, well, I do actually, yeah. But then I said to one of them one night, I said, look, is this really it? And he says, I don't think so. Right. I said to BB, is this really it? And he goes, that's what they're saying. But he says, if I live another 10 years, I might call you up again and we'll do it again, this sort of thing. And he's the best ambassador the blues has ever had, because he's the man who took it to the much wider audience. And he's the man who took it to the white audience, very importantly, because, as you know, when he started, no way would white people be listening to blues. It was the whole country was segregated, never mind the music. And he's the guy who crossed it over, and he took it back to Africa, he took it everywhere over the world, so he achieved an incredible amount of recognition for the blues.
You've picked one of his tracks, you've picked Thriller's Gone.
Yeah.
What is it about that track specifically?
Well, I love minor key blues for a start.
Right.
And it's in C minor, so that right there it's got me before you even start with the lyric. But the lyric's beautiful as well. I love kind of sad sort of love songs that are played in that kind of blues mode. I love that. I've always liked it. Going back to like Peter Green and people like that, that sort of minor key thing, to me, and the blues and the guitar, they just go together so well. And he's a master of it. So this is the Thriller's Gone.
On Planet Rock, it's B.B. King, and The Thrill Is Gone, part of Gary Moore's choices on My Planet Rocks. Gary, talking about really all the influences that you've had. You mentioned briefly before we played that song, Peter Green. We've got a Fleetwood Mac track to play. Did Peter mentor you in the way that it's commonly believed that he did?
Well, what happened was, when I was in the band Skid Row, after we became a three-piece band, we were opening for Fleetwood Mac in a place called the National Stadium in Dublin, which was a boxing place. It wasn't like, it doesn't sound, it sounds like a big stadium, but actually it was just a hall with a boxing ring. And the bands used to play on the boxing ring in the round. A lot of the time, play on the boxing ring in the middle. That would become the stage to take the ropes away.
Yeah.
And so we were opening for him, and I met him after we played, and he said, "I really like your playing." And I was like, "What? You like my playing?" It was like, and I've been really looking up to him for quite a long time already by that point. And I'd seen him play with John Mayall. I'd seen him play with Fleetwood Mac twice in Belfast and in Dublin, through the various incarnations of that band, even when it was a four-piece band with Jeremy Spencer, and then when Danny Cohen joined. So I saw them go through various kind of lineup changes and different kind of incarnations musically. And I was just blown away to meet the guy, never mind have him say that he liked my playing. And he said, "Do you want to meet up later on at the hotel? We're staying just blah 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 up the road here." And we had to go and play another show that night in the countryside somewhere, so we had to leave straight away after. I said, "Go and play another gig," and I met up with him, and we kind of sat up all night talking together, and he had his guitar there and Danny's guitar was there, and we just sat up and played. And to have his kind of endorsement was a huge thing, because he was a big hero around Dublin at that time. So if Peter Green liked you, it meant you weren't crap after all. People wouldn't spit on you so many times and talk about you so much behind your back. It was great. And then the next day we travelled to the next gig together. We played in Cork the next day, and then after that he persuaded his manager to get Skid Row out of Ireland, and we got a record deal, and we went to London. So a lot of it was through him. He gave me my first big break, yeah, definitely.
Tell me about the song why you've chosen Black Magic Woman.
I just think it represents Peter in so many ways. I think a lot of people think of Peter Green just as a great blues guitarist, but he was also a great singer and a great songwriter. And this was a very early effort from him, and it's such a simple song. I mean, it was covered by Santana later on, as you probably know, and became a huge hit for Santana. But this is the original version, and to me this says it all. It's got that lovely solo in the middle, it's got that, almost with that very spooky chord again, and it's in a minor key, of course, which D minor, the saddest key of all, as they said in Spinal Tap. It starts with that little D minor chord triad up the top there with all the reverb on it, and it just kicks in. And when you get to the solo, the tone of the guitar and his touch is so evident that he's really special. Again, he replaced Eric Clapton in the Blues Breakers. After the Blues Breakers album, he did the Hard Road album with John Mayall, and then he nicked the Blues Breakers and formed Fleetwood Mac. When he was 20 years old, he joined John Mayall, and he had to fill Eric Clapton's shoes. So how good is that? He had to be bloody good, and he was probably the only other guy in the country who could have done it. And he carried it off so well. He was a very dignified player, and he used to leave so much space, and there was so much emotion in his playing. It was magical. You were talking about magic fingers earlier. When you watched him play, it looked like he was doing nothing, and all this incredible music was coming out. And he's just one of those guys, incredibly charismatic as well, not just on stage but off stage. He was one of those people that you were just drawn to. He had that kind of larger than life persona, and a very, very special man, I think. And when people ever say to me, if they ever say about white guys not being able to play the blues, I just say Peter Green. That's it. Just don't even talk to me about it, because he could play it as well as anyone.
Black Magic Woman from Fleetwood Mac on Planet Rock, and Gary Moore is this week's special guest. I'm really glad you've chosen a track from the Black Rose album for your Thin Lizzy choice, because it's my favourite Lizzy album. You'd already worked with Phil Lynott in Skid Row, but just for those who don't know, how did you get the first call to join Thin Lizzy?
Which time?
Let's start at the very beginning.
Well, no, I'll do a very kind of like condensed version of it. But I was in the band in '74, replacing Eric Bell, who was the original guitarist who played on Whiskey in the Jar. I was in for about 4 months, but that was kind of a temporary thing for me. Although they thought I was going to stay, it didn't really work out for various reasons, which we don't really need to go into.
No, sure.
And then a couple of years later, I'm in Coliseum 2, and I get a call from Phil saying that Brian Robertson had cut his hand up in a fight in the Speakeasy Club, very close to where we are now, in Margaret Street. And he got in a fight with some guys. Frankie Miller was involved somehow, I think, and he couldn't do the tour. So they had this big American tour coming up with Queen. This was 1970, the end of '76. So the tour started January '77 for 3 months. So I wasn't doing anything. My band was off the road at that time, Coliseum 2. So I said, yeah, I'll do it. So I did the tour, and they asked me to stay. They really, really wanted me to stay because the tour was so successful, and I obviously fitted in because, you know, it was...
Did you enjoy it?
I did, yeah. It was great. It was great playing to that many people as well.
Yeah.
But Coliseum 2 had another album coming out, and I just could not walk out. I mean, I'd been with these guys for 3 years, and but I went round to Phil's house. I wasn't even in Thin Lizzy, obviously, at this time. I went round to his flat one night, and he was sitting up in bed. It was about 7 or 8 o'clock at night, and he was still sitting in bed. You know, he didn't want to get up too early that day. Didn't want to push it too hard, you know. So, and I only ever envisaged the song Prison Walkways being an instrumental. So I've got this melody, what do you reckon on this? And he goes, that sounds really French to me. He says, I'm going to write some lyrics. I said, lyrics? I don't want any lyrics. It's an instrumental. Get lost, you know. He said, well, leave it with me and I'll try it anyway. So he did. He went away and he wrote the lyrics. And, of course, you know, we got together any time that we weren't actually working with our own bands. We'd be in the studio working on that song for weeks. And to myself, I'd say, I'll give it another year with Coliseum 2 and see how it goes. And nothing really happened for the band. And so when I got the call to become a permanent member this time, I did. And we made the Black Rose album, which is where this song's from.
It was, for many people, it's their favourite Thin Lizzy album.
Really?
Certainly it's for mine. I mean, tracks like S&M, like, it's incredible sound, incredible noise on the track. What do you remember of the recording of that album? Was it a good time for the band?
Well, we did a lot of it in Paris, in a place called the EMI Pathé Marconi Studios. For tax reasons, I believe.
Right, yeah, a lot of people did.
A lot of people were recording out of England, and then we sort of finished it off sort of over here in Tony Visconti's studio, Good Earth, in Dean Street, again just round the corner. And obviously he'd worked with Phil before, and he was kind of their producer of the moment. He was really good to work with, actually, Tony. He was a very quite an inventive guy in the studio. He definitely had his own sound. I think when you hear that record, you can hear Tony's sound in that record. It's kind of got this kind of ambience to the drums, and it's kind of, it's not, guitar-wise, it's not my favourite sound, actually.
Oh, really?
I think on some songs, I think the guitar is better than others, but because we kept tracking the guitars, which was something Phil always used to want to do, as soon as we'd do a guitar track, he used to have this saying, wobble it, which meant double it. He used to say wobble it for some reason, double track it, and we'd go straight in and double track the guitar. So every Thin Lizzy record has double tracked, double guitars.
But you're playing twice?
Yeah, everybody played twice, and that's what the kind of part of the Thin Lizzy sound was. But sometimes it would make the guitar sound a bit smaller. Sometimes more is less in those situations. But I like the overall sound of the record, and there was one track in particular, Sarah. You know, when we did that, and Tony spent ages with me getting the guitar sound for that very clean guitar sound, and he put it through Eventide harmonizers and all kinds of things, and I had this kind of little pedal called a DOD distortion thing, and I put the guitar through that, and we DI'd it. There was no amp on that particular sound for the solo, and we came up with some very different sounds that you wouldn't associate with Thin Lizzy, because actually that song was probably meant to be on a Phil Lynott solo album, and we had recorded that separately, the backing track, but for whatever reason it ended up on the record, and it's such a nice song. I mean, I actually wrote a lot of that song.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I did. I wrote a hell of a lot of that song. I would say I wrote 80% of that song.
Wow.
Yeah. Because I had all the chords down and everything and all the arrangement. Then we were talking, Phil's first baby, Sarah, had just been born at that time, and we've talked about it and about making it about her, and then so obviously the lyric became that. And sort of,
but it's got such a nice solo in it. It's a really lovely
melodic.
Yeah, it is. That's back to the melody that you were talking about that you picked up from the other guitar.
It's very of its time. I mean, I was listening to a lot of stuff like Jeff Beck at that time, and a lot of kind of fusion music, and there was a lot of that kind of sound in that track for me with the guitar aspect of it anyway. But I mean, the album, it was a good record. I think there was some very good songs on there, like you said, and Black Rose, the actual title track, I think is a very strong song in terms of, it's got a lot of very good sections in it. It tells a good story. It's got that very big dark Celtic thing, and it's got the rock thing, and it's got the melodic thing, and it's got the Irish jigs. It's got good guitar playing in it. It's got a hell of a lot of stuff going for it, I think, that song.
Planet Rock.
Planet Rock. Planet Rock. Where rock lives.